Hi, this is Dr. C, and we're here to talk about an example, a worked example, showing how events work in App Studio. So let's go ahead and start this. Let's say you are wanting to write a program that says hi to the user in a pop-up whenever the user clicks a button. So I know that's trivial, but it'll be simple for our example. So you're going to have a control. In this case, you're going to have a form that has a button on it. And you're going to have an event loop and a trigger function. And these will get created when you create the on-click event for the control. App Studio will create those two pieces automatically, and they'll run in the background of your code. And then you will have an event handler, and App Studio will give you a framework for this. It'll create that when you create the event, and then you write the code in it for your event handler. So let's look at an example. So here we have on the left App Studio, and I have a form, and I created a button on it, and then I right-clicked on the button so that I could create the event for that button. And you can see that the first menu says Go to Event. So I pick Go to Event, and then on the right are listed all the events for whatever control I have selected here. In this case, button. And so I'm going to pick on click. The minute I do that, App Studio writes the code for those two helping event looping and trigger function. And then it gives me this framework of the event handler code. And I can go in and write my code, which I did here on line 2. I wrote some code here. Okay. Now, if you notice, before we move on here, see how this function doesn't have a name? In the past, we've seen function and then the name and then the parameters. And here, this is still a parameter place. In this particular example, there are no parameters, but the function has no name because it gets called whenever this event happens. All right, so it doesn't get called when it's named by the main program. It gets called when this event happens, and the trigger function calls it. Okay, that's called an anonymous function. All right, so let's run this example and watch what's happening here. So first I put a button in here, and I'm going to go over here and name the form. And it's a form, so I'm going to say FRM and then demo, because that's what this form is doing. And then I'm going to name my button. I'm going to start the name with BTN for button. And then I'm going to name it greeting, because that's kind of what it does. When you click the button, you get a greeting. Okay? And I don't like that it says button. It's kind of plain. So I'm going to go down into the events while I have button chosen, the properties. These are all the button properties. And I'm going to type in submit. So I like that better. Okay? And now I'm going to do the event. So I'll right-click on my button. And I must be thinking about it. There we go. Go to event and pick on click, because that's the event I want. And I get this framework of the event handler with the anonymous function. And I'm going to type my code in there. So that's the alert, hi there, or hello there. Okay. So I've got that's the code I want to run when they click on the button. Let's go ahead and run that program and see what happens. So I'm going to run that in the browser. There's my button. And when I click on that, that's an event. And there's the event handler putting hello there. Okay. So let's do a little more. Let's get an input control, a Bootstrap 4 input control. And let's go name it INPT name, because name is what it's going to have. And I'm going to have the user type their name in there. Now, whenever I'm doing App Studio, I always have to fuss with it a little bit. So I'm going to fuss with it a little. And then I don't like that it says input. So I'm going to go into its properties and up by header, go up a little. There we go. See where input is. I'm going to type in enter your name. So that just makes a little more sense. Okay. And of course, I don't like it to touch the edge, and then I have to line things up. Alrighty, so I'm kind of happy here. And I'm going to go in, and when that button gets clicked, I'm going to add some more event handler code. So here I want to be able to say hello Bob or hello Cindy. So I'm going to create a variable in my event handler function called username, and then I'm using the name of the control that has their name typed into it, and the value property, which is the property that's holding the name that they type into it. Okay? And I know that because I can look on here and see that there's a value property for this control. All right, I can also look in the App Studio documentation. So I'm going to take there out, and I'm going to put in, since this is a template literal, I'm going to put username in there. So it says hello Bob or whatever when they click on the button. So it's going to do two things. Okay, so let's go ahead and try that. And we'll run it. We'll enter a name here. And I'll click submit. It says hello Cindy. So that's how that works. And it makes sense once you know all the pieces that are happening. A lot's happening in the background. Whoops, sorry about that. I want to go to the next slide. There we go. And that's all I have about that example. I hope you enjoyed watching.